everyone, welcome to our latest wine questions video. This week, as you can see, we have a few props with us. Tom actually recently spent the last, 10 days?
Yeah.
10 days in Madeira, which is in Portugal. And so for this video, we're going to do something a little bit different related to Madeira and its wines. First of all, Tom, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Madeira itself?
True Madeira comes from the island of Madeira. It doesn't come from Canada, it doesn't come from the United States, it doesn't come from Australia. It comes from the island of Madeira.
Okay.
And Madeira is one of the great fortified wines, along with port and sherry. And so one of the things that makes Madeira special is that it's a wine that's been, you can almost say, aggressively aged. But what they do is they, rather than sort of a cool, sort of stable atmosphere where they age the wine in the cellars, they bake the wine. So the wine's heated up in an attic. Sort of the top quality wines are aged in this attic, so it gets these heating and cooling cycles. And the wine gets oxidized. But the wines we have here from our left to right are a Sercial, which is sort of the driest style of Madeira.
Which is this one here, the latest one.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're going to move to a Verdelho,
Okay.
which is sort of a medium dry Madeira. And then on to Boal, which is sort of a medium sweet Madeira. And then finally to Malmsey, which is also the same grape as Malvasia, which is sort of the sweetest Madeira. And so these are sort of a great way to look at these wines. So if you're looking for a drier Madeira, you might want to be looking for things like a Sercial or a Verdelho. If you're looking for a sweeter one, Boal or Malmsey are probably your best bet.
And okay, so just to clarify, we can get all four of these styles, at least one producer in the Canadian marketplace, generally everywhere?
Absolutely. There's a couple of producers that will tend to see a little bit more depending on where you're located in the market. But some producers are Enriquez and Enriquez.
Enriquez and Enriquez?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of these you'll see that labeled as H and H, because you can sort of roll off the tongue a little bit easier. You'll also see a big producer called Blandies, and they're sort of known for a wine called the Duke of Clarence. And you'll also see another producer called Leacock's, which in most markets we typically see their rainwater Madeira. And then some of these you'll see a few other ones, but they tend to be very small stocks and availabilities. Yeah, so now if you look at sort of the lighter one, if you just want to pick that up, you can see it's got a fairly golden, sort of slightly brownish sort of color to it.
Yeah.
It sort of looks like a bit like old apple juice.
Yes, it does look like old apple juice.
And if you just sort of give it a sniff, and we won't really go into the tasting too much of it just because they're a bit of a higher alcohol wine. Mm-hmm. So you'll see it's got some fairly nutty aromas, so you get a bit of almonds. You might get a little bit of mild toffee or dried fruits. And sometimes what you can get is, surprisingly, is some citrus sort of aromas out of Madeira. So you might see things like lime or lemon, but that's not always as common. Mm-hmm. And then so if you pick up your Verdelho, you'll see that it's got a significantly darker color. And so it's going to be, it's got a very slight green tinge to it if you look at it closely. But it's a little bit orangier, and it's certainly a brown style wine, so it looks almost a bit like a tawny port. And if you give it a sniff, you'll see more toffee, more caramel. It's a little bit richer, and maybe you might even pick up a little bit of savory notes to it. Mm-hmm. And so we'll go back and taste these all quickly as well.
Okay.
And then the Boal, you'll start to get a lot more of those sort of toffee and caramel and some really nice sort of authentic sort of Madeira sort of smells that you might associate with that.
That's a lovely color, this one.
And then finally, when we go to the Malmsey, so much more toffee. We're going to get some coffee aromas and things like that as well. So it's just a bit earthier and a little bit more smoky. And one thing to remember is that these wines are going to pair differently with different foods. So the drier Madeiras, something like the Sercial, should be served more as an aperitif wine, whereas the sweeter Malmseys are much more of a dessert wine. So you can do anything like pouring a Malmsey over ice cream, which is pretty good. You could also have it with some chocolate desserts or sort of toffee-based desserts.
Okay.
Where something like a Sercial is really nice with some soups, or you could have it with dried nuts.
All right, Tom, so to wrap things up, do you want to tell them a little bit about how to cellar and store Madeira?
Sure thing. The most Madeiras are ready to drink when they're released, so you don't have to worry about any additional cellaring. Okay. But it is a little bit tricky sometimes to finish off a bottle over the course of a weekend, so you're going to have to worry about what to do with this wine. The best way to store Madeira, whether it's opened or not, is to store it upright in a cool, dark place. You can store it in your liquor cabinet, but you don't want to store it on its side in your wine racks. It's very hard on the cork that they're used for sealing Madeiras, and it's just not the best way for Madeira because it's such a high acid wine.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our video on Madeira. If you have any questions and you'd like to follow up to something that you saw in this video, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And as always, if you have a wine question that's on your mind, you can get in touch with us through Facebook, Twitter, or by email. See you next week.